Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Brooke Mitchell, and today's topic is autumn exploration, Maritime, Maine, and Acadia National Park with NatHab Expedition Leader Arthur Kampmann. Thank you so much for being here today, Arthur. Over to you.
Thanks, Brooke, and thanks for having me. And thanks to everyone for tuning in this afternoon, wherever you are in the world, to learn a little bit about Maine, our upcoming season on the Maine coast in the fall time. So let's get it going. So, a little bit about what I'll cover today on this presentation overview. I'm going to start it off with a destination overview, kind of a Maine, some of the potential wildlife we will see along this journey into Maine. I'm going to go through a day-by-day breakdown of the trip, stuff that I think is important to know about the trip. And then I'll finish it off with the importance of packing, some important things you'll want to bring, weather, stuff like that to consider for packing. And then we'll end it with some questions, and hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions that come this way. So a little bit about myself. My name is Arthur Kampmann, and I've now been an expedition leader with Natural Habitat for 3 years. But before I started guiding, I was working in New York City in publishing, and one day just got really burnt out on that lifestyle, and I actually started to look for jobs in the outdoor industry, and one that popped up was a kayaking job in Acadia National Park. And so this trip is near and dear to my heart because 11 years after starting my guiding career, I get to go back to Maine, a place I love so much because I grew up in southern New England in Connecticut and would often spend summers up in this part of Maine in a place called Winter Harbor on the Schoodic Peninsula. And so Maine has been a very important part of my life, and I absolutely love it, and I'm so excited to share it with everyone. So I'm a big map person, and I love, I think it helps orient us. And so over on the left side of your screen, you're going to see the map of New England, and that's comprising of the 6 states of New England, starting in Connecticut, then going to Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and then all the way into Maine. And Maine is the furthest north in New England. It's an incredible state known for its natural beauty. And I love the fact that this trip that we get to do, we're not trying to combine a lot of different New England itineraries into one. We're actually going to explore the down east portion of Maine at just a really unhurried pace. And that to me is one of the great parts of this trip is we really get to know down east Maine in an incredible way, taking our time to explore it, not doing the really long drives every day where we have to, drive many, many hours. No, we're kind of going the opposite of that. We're really getting to know this specific section of Maine from Camden over to the Bar Harbor area. And that's just incredible. And we'll do it in a couple different aspects. We will visit some places on land, and then we'll also visit some of the destinations via boat. And so I'll get into that with the types of boats we'll be using. But Maine's coastline is absolutely incredible. If you were just to straight line Portland all the way up to Eastport, it would be 228 miles. But since Maine's coastline was carved out by the glaciers during the last ice age, this coastline actually can stretch over 3,000 miles, 3,478 to be exact. So a lot of really cool little coves and inlets to explore, and having the time to do that is really a great aspect of this trip. In Maine has been a long, influential place to many early conservationists in the United States and for the world. People such as Rachel Carson, Henry David Thoreau, Theodore Roosevelt. They often found great solace and a sense of wilderness in the great state of Maine. And so I'm so excited to get to talk about it and show everyone, what we're going to be exploring. So before I get into, a little bit more of our modern world, I do want to pay tribute to the native cultures that are on this section of Maine, in the area of Maine, and they're known as the Wabanaki Nation. And the Wabanaki Nation are comprised of 5 different groups: the Penobscot, Micmac, Passamaquoddy, Maliseet, and Abenaki. Now, one thing I love about them is they're referred to as the people of the Dawnland, because this part of the country is one of the first places that sees sunrise in the United States. For a short period of time, a few months, Acadia National Park is the first place that the sunrise is seen in the United States. And so the people of the Dawnland, I think, is a really great descriptive of the people, the native peoples of Maine. And all these different nations, the Penobscot, Micmac, Passamaquoddy, Maliseet, and Abenaki, they all have different geographical specialties. And so they specialize in very specific ways throughout their regions. But all of those 5 groups are comprised of what you would find in Maine. And along our trip, we'll definitely be discussing them. But in Bar Harbor, there's actually a really cool museum, and it's a self-guided tour. They don't allow tour guides to go in and lead the trip in there. But NatHab would happily pay for your entry fee if you are interested in learning more about the Wabanaki. The Abbey Museum in Bar Harbor is really, really awesome for that. So love that aspect. Now from maybe a little more a modern historical sense about where Maine is at. In the early 1600s, Maine was more or less discovered by Europeans. The French were the first to sail in. A man by the name of Samuel de Champlain came in 1604, and he was followed shortly behind by the British Navy. And one thing that they all recognized that Maine had a tremendous amount of was timber. And so the lumber industry in Maine is one of the first things that brought people into the state of Maine. So when they came over, they had depleted a lot of their resources in England and that part of the world. And so they came to Maine because Britain had the incredible naval fleets, but they needed wood. And so when they came to Maine, they found a very specific type of tree, which is the state tree of Maine, the white pine. And it is a really straight, tall, workable piece of wood. And they actually started to mark all of those white pines with the king's stamp. And so that meant that that tree was no longer this place's, it was England's tree. And they were going to bring it back and put it on their vessels and sail it around the world. So definitely a crazy aspect when you think about it, because the lumber industry is a massive part of what Maine is today, because it is still a huge part of Maine's current economic model. They're doing it a lot more sustainably these days, but it's what drove people, one of the major reasons that drove people to Maine. Another thing that brought people into the great state of Maine was the fishing. The Gulf of Maine is a nutrient-rich body of water, and really a lot of fish species are found in it. But the one that had the early explorers' interest was cod. And that's because cod, after it caught, could be dried and salted and then brought back to England or France, wherever they were bringing the fish back, and it would keep really well. So the cod industry was massive for a long time in the state of Maine. And it wasn't until the early 1800s where the lobster industry actually became more prevalent, once we realized ways to transport lobster without spoiling the animal. Then fast forward into the 1800s, the United States is being established. We're starting to move west. Land is becoming, we're getting less land in the New England area because more people are showing up in this new country and people are starting to move west. But we still need space. We want a place to go out and find what drew us to this new land. And Maine still had that. Maine still had a lot of space. So this term rusticators actually became a term of use. And that was for people from Philadelphia, New York City, the big cities. They would actually go up to Maine for the summer. They would find some form of local who had a farm, some form of place for them to stay, and they would spend a good portion of the summer in the state of Maine. So I often view the word rusticators as an early word for tourists, because it's kind of what they were. They were, getting out of the cities, getting away from these warmer places, and getting up to Maine to explore nature and to find peace and wilderness, really. So it's just an amazing aspect of Maine's history. A big reason that people today go up to New England, up to Maine, up to Acadia National Park is to see the vibrant fall colors that take place every autumn. And so as the environmental factors start to shift, we are basically changing from summer into fall. Long days are now getting a lot shorter. Warm days are getting a lot colder. The plants are starting to sense this. And that chlorophyll that the plants are producing all year round, or in the summertime, that pigment that they're producing, it actually starts to wane. And other pigments that are ever present in the leaves, carotenoids and anthocyanins, those become more visible because the chlorophyll is now less visible. So as those other pigments become more visible, we start to see those reds and yellows that New England is famous for. And Acadia National Park is one of the best places to see fall colors because you have such a mixture of trees in New England. So this mixture of trees just can paint the forest in just reds, yellows. The forest floor is red with the blueberries, because those also turn a really great color. And so the fall colors is something that is absolutely one of the highlights of any trip to New England, any trip to Acadia National Park. So I'm so excited to see them up there because it's a constant for me. I love seeing the fall colors in Acadia National Park. Another aspect of Maine that you can't not go to Maine and not at least think about lobster or sea lobster, because it's a huge aspect of the state of Maine. So the photo on the left is actually from our boat tour that we'll do in Bar Harbor, where we pull up lobster traps. And by we pull them up, we're using modern conveniences to pull them up. Back in the day, they had to pull them up all the way themselves, so that was definitely a lot more of a feat. But it's a really fun experience to see how it's all done and learn about it while being out on a lobster boat, because a lobster boat would be the image over to the right. And so lobster fishing in Maine is a huge part of the state's industry. They can make somewhere $600 to $700 million annually comes in from the lobster industry. So a massive economic driver in the state of Maine. But it wasn't always that way. In the early 1800s, lobster was not a sought after cuisine. It really wasn't. They actually had, it was slave food, poor man's food. A lot of workers had it in their contracts that they would only be fed lobster 2 or 3 days a week. And so it's kind of come full circle in that regard, because now it's usually one of the high ticket items on a menu. So really fun to kind of experience and see that lobster industry in action. And essentially the way it works with the lobster industry is it's more or less a passed down fishing license, because they're very expensive to purchase. So if you were to go and buy a lobster permit, which the state of Maine doesn't regularly give them out, it's going to cost you upwards of $1 million. And so typically what happens is it's within the family, dad's thinking about getting out of the industry and the son is saying, I could make some money and do that. And so it's a great job for local Mainers, because it has a lot of economic upsides to it, but it's also a very physical and demanding job. They can be out 12, 15 hours of the day if the fishing's not good and they're pulling traps, and they going to be out a really long time. And it's fishing, it's not catching, so you never are guaranteed to have this robust number coming back annually. And so lobster is a massive part of Maine's culture and just everything in Maine. You'll see lobster signs everywhere. It's pretty incredible. Another aspect of Maine are its lighthouses. Obviously, one of the things I think of when I think of Maine is lighthouses. They're usually perched in some really scenic location, uh, very picturesque. I love them honestly in the fog is usually one of my favorite times. I love the lighthouses because you might only be able to get a glimpse of it, but you can hear it because they have a horn associated with them. And early on for mariners in the 1800s, 1700s, going up this rough, rocky coastline before lighthouses were really utilized along the coast of Maine. Can only imagine how many ships sank prior to lighthouses, but they definitely became a huge aid in developing that coastline of Maine. It's pretty incredible, and we'll see some very beautiful lighthouses throughout our trip. And you can actually see in the lower right-hand part of this photo a lobster buoy. So you got two iconic images, two iconic Maine things in one image here. Now, Acadia National Park. This is Maine's only national park, and it is an incredible place. It protects the beautiful coastal mountains that are not often found on the east coast of the United States. So you have these mountains 1,500 feet above the sea level, but it also just has this incredible forest that it also protects. So it's home to some really cool marine mammals and also terrestrial mammals. But also, as you can see in this photo, the time of the year we're going to be visiting, it's just magnificent to take a stroll through the forests in New England. And so as the United States was being developed, parks were being established in the West, Yellowstone, Yosemite, all these iconic parks in the West, the vast majority of the population still lived on the East Coast. And so we wanted to have a place to play. And so fortunately, a couple people played a massive role in this, and a man by the name of George Dorr, which you can refer to as the father of Acadia National Park, he worked tirelessly to try to establish this national park because he realized after visiting a lot of the parks in the West that for ourselves, for the human spirit, we need to have wild spaces to visit. And I'm ever grateful that George Dorr put in the time, and along with Charles Eliot and John D. Rockefeller Jr., these three worked they worked so hard to establish this national park, and I think a lot of people are grateful for that. And like a lot of national parks, Acadia was created through the national monument status, and so President Woodrow Wilson actually established this as a national monument using the Antiquities Act. And then from there, it became Lafayette National Park in 1919. So it was Sierra de Mont's National Monument in 1916, Lafayette National Park in 1919, and then Acadia National Park in 1929. So that was kind of the process from national monument to what we now know as Acadia National Park. And it's a very unique park in the sense that the vast majority of the land in Acadia was actually donated. So not a typical thing that we find in our western parks. Acadia National Park, a vast majority of it did come from donations from either people who lived in the Maine area. So some really incredible people helped establish that. And nowadays, Acadia is just such a great place to go for hikes, walks on the carriage roads. And the carriage roads are 120 miles of road that John D. Rockefeller Jr. established on the island so people could experience the inner part of the island from horse and carriage. And so it's really cool. A lot of people nowadays will bike on the carriage roads or walk on the carriage roads. And it's just, I love it, especially in the fall time. And so really, really cool. And another big aspect that shaped Acadia National Park, and one that we can be grateful for because of the time of the year we're visiting, was the Great Fire of 1947, because that fire burned about 17,000 acres. But what it did was it actually got rid of a lot of the conifers, and it allowed the deciduous trees to come in. So when those conifers that don't change colors, they were out of the picture, and these incredible deciduous trees, whether it was a sugar maple or a beech, the beech tree, they came in, and that's why we have incredible colors on Acadia National Park on Mount Desert Island. And it's a really cool thing that you can see with the fall colors is you can actually track where the fire was in 1947 based off of the fall colors. So it's really cool. So some wildlife that we can have the potential to see. Obviously, we all know, well travelers with Nat Hab, that it's not a zoo, and we're fortunate to see any wildlife when we get to see it. But some of the ones we'll look for, especially on our boat tours, will be some seals. So we have the gray seals and harbor seals. And the gray seals are incredible because they are huge. Males can be close to 800 pounds. So it's a lot bigger than a large harbor seal, which would be about 300 pounds. But they're just amazing, and they like to haul out, and so that's what they're doing in this photo here. They're hauling out, which is an energy conservation method where they actually get out of that cold water and they sit out on land and let the warm air warm them up. And so really great for observing and taking photos of, and just watching the seals, because I do love the different types of seals we have in Maine. Another one we can maybe find from the boats are harbor porpoise, and so they're a little smaller than a common dolphin, and they can actually be kind of elusive. Sometimes you'll see them, and by the time I say the word porpoise, they're gone. But definitely one that's out there and we'll be looking for when we're on the water. Now, some other wildlife we might find are bald eagles. Maine is definitely known for its bald eagles. Common loons, another incredible animal that Maine is known for. And then some amazing ones. We love our wild turkeys in Maine. Quite often we'll be driving and find a group hanging out in someone's yard, and it's pretty amazing. I love the turkeys. And being fall time, obviously on the Atlantic Flyway, got some really good opportunities for migration of birds. So that's cool. If you're a birder, can definitely keep our eyes out for some, interesting hawks or songbirds. So really a good time of the year for those species. And then white-tailed deer are pretty abundant in the down east portion of Maine. So we'll most likely try to find some of those as well. Another good time of the year is the males will have their amazing antlers. And so we'll be looking for them. And I will just cover some of the other species that are in Maine, but we might not see just based off the time of the year and where we're going. So Maine has a really healthy black bear population, 30 to 35,000 black bears, which is astonishing for how big of a state Maine is. But they're primarily more to the west in the interior of Maine. There are a few along the coast, but it's very unlikely that we'll see one because Maine has very dense forests and the bears have learned how to be elusive. They are around within the area we'll be, but they're pretty elusive. Moose, another iconic animal of Maine, definitely around the coastal area, but the ones that are along the coast are definitely more shy than the ones in the interior of Maine, because the ones in the interior of Maine rarely see people because there is not much going on the interior of Maine, pretty good wilderness. So the ones along the coast which do exist, they're just not, I've never seen one on the coast of Maine, and I've actually never seen a black bear in the state of Maine. So those two animals, they are high numbers, good abundance of both of them. It's just unlikely that we'll see them on this trip. Whales. We're kind of at the tail end of humpback whale migration. They come up to the Gulf of Maine to feed in the summertime. It's just this time of the year, they're going to be pushing pretty far offshore of Maine. So we could get lucky and see one, but I would say once again on the more unlikely side. Because they are already starting their migration out of Maine, or they're really far offshore still feeding. But it has been a really good year for whales along the East Coast. I've seen a lot of videos of humpbacks all over the East Coast. And then the last one I'll cover is puffins. So puffins are an iconic Maine species as well, but unfortunately around mid-August they take off. So the puffins come into Maine to nest, and they nest from May, June, July, and then sometime in August they typically take off. So we will learn a lot about seabirds, and we'll actually see some members of the same family. Puffins are in, but we most likely will not see a puffin on this trip. So some of the transportation we'll be utilizing while on this trip, we have 3 different boat tours. So these are 2 of them. The schooner sail out of Camden, and then this is our private charter that we'll take out to the Isle of Haut. And so that's when we're on the water portion of this. But when we're on the land portion of it, we'll actually have 2 15-passenger vans, and you'll have 2 expedition leaders. So you'll have 1 driver per van, and so max 7 in each van. So, the maximum amount of people that can be on this trip is 14, so nice small group. And so really we'll always have a lot of space and plenty of space for everything you could bring. The cuisine of Maine, of course, can't not talk about some of this great stuff. So New England clam chowder, top right, lobster, bottom left, blueberries. I mean, you can blueberry everything in Maine. Blueberry ice cream, blueberry pie. It's really an incredible state for some good blueberries. And then the top left, Maine actually has a really booming farming industry. And so if you're not a seafood lover, you don't have to be on this trip. You don't have to just eat lobster, because there's a lot of really good organic food coming out of Maine these days. And so I do like to highlight that. Some of our accommodations that we'll stay at. So we're going to start at the Residence Inn in Bangor, perfectly situated. Our welcome dinner is in the downstairs at a great restaurant called Timber. And then bottom left there, you'll have the Lord Camden Inn. I love it. It's right in downtown Camden. We can walk to the schooner sail from the inn. Love all the brick. Camden is just as quaint as it comes. And then you have the Pilgrim Inn over on the lower right. That's 1793 is not the address. That was the year it was built. And it was actually voted the 4th best B&B in the United States by USA Today. So a pretty incredible place if you ask me. And then the top right will be where we'll spend our final 2 nights of the trip, is in Bar Harbor, and right along the ocean's edge, really perfectly situated for us. So get into the day by day. So day 1 is everyone's arriving unless you're coming in a night early. If you are coming in a day early, the hotel, the Residence Inn does have a shuttle. So just call them and you can arrange that shuttle, and they will come and pick you up at the airport. Now, if you're arriving on the first day of the trip, your expedition leader will be there to pick you up as long as it's before 4 p.m. And we'll be tracking your flights. If you're a little delayed, we'll obviously come and get you, or we'll make arrangements for you to get to the hotel. So don't worry about that. And then we just have our orientation and welcome dinner right in the hotel. So really convenient, great way to meet the group. And then we're off. So day 2, we're going to be making our way down to Camden, but we're going to do a lot of stops along the way. And one of the great parts about this trip is there's no set way to do every day of this trip, because there's so much to do. There's so many different land trusts throughout Maine where we can go for short hikes, go for exploring. But some of the major things is the Sail Power and Steam Museum, which is amazing. You can see Jim, his dedication to this place. It's a really cool blast from the past when you go in there and hear the stories about just early exploration in the state of Maine. And we will also visit one of Maine's more iconic lighthouses, Owl's Head, really beautiful, situated right out on a nice point. Absolutely love that lighthouse. And then we'll spend the night in Camden that night, where we will then the following morning, we actually go out on the schooner sail in Penobscot Bay. Amazing. If it's not windy, you will motor. But if it is windy, you will sail. and it's awesome. Even when it's not windy, they'll have you help pull up the sails if you want to. Good little exercise, earn your lunch type of thing. But really cool. The sailboat we go on, I want to say, is 105, maybe 106 years old now. Just incredible. Beautiful boat. Really skilled mariners along the state of Maine. We'll also go for some nice walks or hikes that day in Camden Hills State Park and areas around Camden. And then we will spend the evening in Camden after a great dinner at one of the local restaurants. So day 4, we're going to be taking off from Camden, and our final destination is over to Deer Isle to the Pilgrim Inn. But we're going to be having a lot of fun this day exploring some of the quieter sides of Down East or Mid-Coast Maine. We'll actually stop at an American fort built in started construction in 1844, and it's right along the banks of the Penobscot River. Amazing scenery. And just kind of fascinating to think about them building that in the mid 1800s. So we'll explore that, and then we'll make our way over to some of the quieter parts of Maine for some hikes and exploring. As you can see in this photo, a lot of mushrooms and moss. It always blows everyone's mind how mossy Maine is, and the forests are just incredible. And I love it because you can be hiking in this type of forest and then you pop out and you're right on the ocean. Amazing. And then day 5, after spending a great night at Deer Isle at the Pilgrim Inn, we'll be going out to the least visited part of Acadia National Park called Isle of Haut. It's French, it means high island. And we have the full day out here. We're going to be doing some hiking. If you're not a big hiker, they'll actually, if the seas allow it, they'll take you out to another lighthouse. So if hiking's not really your thing, the captain loves to go out to this other lighthouse, but obviously we always monitor sea conditions and don't want to do anything that would make people uncomfortable. But Isle of Haut is just unbelievable, especially in late September and October. There's hardly anybody out there, which is to me just magnificent because Acadia National Park has grown in popularity over time. But we try to get you to some of the quietest parts of this national park. And so Isle of Haut, I love the fact that we get out there. It's really off the beaten path. Everything we do out in Deer Isle is off the beaten path, and I love it. And so then we'll make our way back to Deer Isle, where we'll actually have dinner. We have dinner both of our nights at the Pilgrim Inn when we're there. They have an amazing downstairs tavern and restaurant, and it's just a really, really cozy spot for us. Now, day 6, we're going to be making our way over to Mount Desert Island. So if you've ever had a friend tell you, oh, I went to Acadia National Park, this is most likely where they went because it's the most visited. But it's the most visited for a reason. It's absolutely stunning. Typically has the best fall colors of the whole trip, just because, like I was mentioning with that fire, there's just more deciduous trees in that area. And so we'll be doing some exploring on the main island of Mount Desert Island of Acadia National Park on day 6. And so it's just a great day because we try to maybe walk on some of the carriage roads, go for some hikes, see some quieter coves, really just taking in this incredible coastal scenery. And day 7, this is a big day where we started off with an amazing sunrise from the top of Cadillac Mountain, where we drive up nice and early. Don't worry for you coffee drinkers. We'll have you all squared away, and any other hot cocoa drinkers or tea drinkers, we got you all squared away for this. And we'll get you up there for a beautiful sunrise, see maybe the first sunrise in the United States, and just drink up that beauty because I've seen, I think, some of the best sunrises in my life up there. Just magnificent. So we'll watch that sunrise, and then we'll actually probably make our way back to the inn where you can have a breakfast, get out of that cold clothes because it is pretty chilly at the top of Cadillac, and then we'll go out and do some more exploring before our afternoon lobster boat tour where we learn everything lobster. You can live out your dreams of being a lobster fisherman. Really fun full day. And then we have our farewell dinner at the Bar Harbor Inn right at the inn. It's really great spot. So that's a fun day of the trip. And then day 8 is our travels back to Bangor. So we just ask to not have any flights before 11 o'clock. And we'll get you there. Sometimes we have people with different flight times, and so we'll do one van's leaving earlier, one van's leaving later, and your expedition leaders will kind of have those times set up as the trip goes on. They'll be keeping a close eye on stuff like that. And so I'll just close out with some important weather and packing stuff, and then we'll get to questions. So you don't need to worry about July and August. I do like them for a reference. You can see the daytime temps in July and August aren't that high, for New England, but then pretty dramatic drop off into September and October. You can see those, and I pulled this right off the NatHab website, and so a really good reference though. And you can also see on the right side that precipitation does go up a little bit as fall sets in. So packing for the trip, on your major suitcase, you have a 40-pound limit. So we just ask you to, 40 pounds is a lot. So please just try to keep it to that. And then you can also have your day pack with you as well. In terms of shoes, it's going to be maybe a little bit of a personal thing, but I think hiking shoes are appropriate for this trip because we'll be doing a lot of good walks for those that are interested, but also then having a pair of comfortable shoes that you can, go out to a nice dinner in, walk around the inns, be comfortable in. I think that's helpful as well. And we do not provide binoculars for this departure. So if you have binoculars, I recommend bringing them. And then for any photographers, this is obviously a great destination for photography. I'm an avid photographer. I think all of the photos in this presentation have been mine. So yeah, I just love taking photos, and this time of the year, unbelievable for taking photos in Maine. And then in terms of clothing, I recommend obviously warm layers, boat rides and sunrise at the top of Cadillac Mountain. Those are pretty cold experiences, so having layers is important. Also, having rain gear is very important because I think you can anticipate at least one day of your trip to have some rain. It's just that time of the year where the seasons are shifting, and there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad gear. So bring your rain gear, and we'll get out there and have some fun. Obviously, we always make adjustments if it's really, really rainy, but have rain gear. It's important. And, just sit back into layers. If you've never gone to a place like this before, layers are a key to success because Maine can also have cold weather, but in the same day, it can also be very warm. So if you're layered up nicely, you can make those micro adjustments throughout the day and then be perfect. Gloves and a hat, absolutely important for our boat rides and our sunrise on Cadillac Mountain. I think gloves and a beanie are very important. And then a couple different jackets, really nice to have. And on our website, if you go on nathab.com, onto the Maine Coastal Explorer, you can actually go on the Know Before You Go icon over on the left side. And there's a ton of good information on here. You also were most likely sent your pre-departure briefing. So if you got your PDB, you have a lot of this info in there as well. But this has just got so much good info, good reference points. But also, you're always welcome to just give NatHab a call and ask any questions. Typically have you all dialed in for stuff like that. And then you can also see the videos and webinars. So in case you want to watch this again, this video will get placed in there. There's also a great one by Court Whalen about photographing the fall colors from a few years back. So definitely recommend that if you're an avid photographer. And even if you're not an avid photographer, we do a lot to help out folks with iPhones, or just if you haven't used your camera in a few years and you want to get it going again, we think this is a great trip for that. So a lot of inspiration to be had from the coast of Maine. And so that concludes everything I have to say, and can take some questions at this point in time.
Oh, that was great, Arthur. Thank you so much for taking us through that just stunning itinerary. It looks incredible. We do have some questions here, and everybody, please, I encourage you, if you're going on this trip or you're thinking about going on this trip, please put your questions in your control panel, and I will get through as many as I can. And then if there's anything left over, please reach out to the Adventure Concierge team if you're already booked, and if you want to book, reach out to your adventure specialist. But let's dive in here. All right, I have a couple themes, Arthur, that are popping up. One of the first ones is, could you elaborate on the difficulty of hikes?
So, great one. This trip is rated as easy. And so with the easy rating, that means 2 miles of unassisted walking. Um, that being said, uh, along the coast of Maine, there is such a wide variety of hikes. And what I've found from years past of leading this trip is we're able to get those that want to go for a shorter hike on the shorter hike and those that want to go for a longer, more difficult hike. And we're able to actually kind of split up and make the group really happy in that regard, because some people might not want to do a ton of hiking. They might be more interested in going to, be doing a short walk and going to a museum. And we've always been able to make that work. But just know that hiking is not required on this trip. It's like I said, rated easy. So don't overly stress about that. And we do have hiking poles for those that are interested. But a lot of the trails, especially the carriage roads in Acadia, are really nicely, they're not too much elevation, and then they don't have too many roots or rocks on it. So it's actually really nice walking.
Fantastic for that, and thank you for addressing the trekking poles as well.
Of course. Yeah.
The next theme that is coming up here are insects. Are bugs a problem this time of year in Maine?
The worst time of the year for bugs in Maine is black fly season, and that's going to be in July. Uh, with the colder nights that are coming in, it gets rid of the majority of the insects in Maine. But there, I would imagine at some point in time we'll see some mosquitoes, but really we're through the major part of it. It's one of the great parts about fall, especially in the northern parts of the world, is there's not too many mosquitoes anymore. I absolutely don't love being out in wilderness with mosquitoes, and so that's why I love fall time exploration. And then another one I will discuss is ticks. New England has definitely got ticks. And so one thing I recommend is you can either tuck your pants into your socks. That's a really good thing to kind of make sure they don't get on your skin. Or you could also, just do a nightly tick check at the end of the day. I grew up in New England and I've never had any issues because I've always done those tick checks. And so it's really important. And maybe beforehand, if you want to do a preventative, you could do the permethrin spray on your clothes. That's always a good one to do before you go out on a trip like this.
Perfect. Thanks for answering that question. Next, if somebody lives within driving distance of the start of the trip, can they drive to the beginning or should they fly, or what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. A great question. We have a lot of folks drive to this departure, and I actually apologize. I meant to mention that. If you are driving to this departure, that is totally acceptable. The Residence Inn in Bangor is a very safe place to leave your car. They will just ask you to go to the front desk so they can make the tag for your car for longer, through the entire duration. So driving to this trip is a total possibility because I know a lot of our guests in the past have done that, and it's always worked out nicely.
Perfect. Thanks for that. Alrighty, let's see what other things. We're getting lots of photography questions.
Yeah.
I know that's always a big topic on these fantastic, beautiful trips. So, in your opinion, what type of lenses should people prepare to bring on this trip?
Oh, the age-old question. So I'm the type of photographer that I believe having a telephoto and a wide angle are what you need. So what I bring on pretty much every trip at this point in time is my 16 to 80 for the landscapes, and then I bring my telephoto 100 to 400 for wildlife, and then also some more zoomed in photos of the trees. because one of my favorite aspects of the photography of this trip is zooming in on the forests and getting kind of this big painting of colors. It's just absolutely incredible. So I think it's important to have a wide angle and a telephoto lens, and then just recognize whichever one you have on you at that point in time is probably not the correct one, and you'll end up going to your iPhone. But really great trip for photographers, and so yeah, definitely a nice variety.
And will there be any opportunities for nighttime photography?
There are opportunities for it, absolutely. Acadia has some great night skies. Deer Isle, Pilgrim Inn, great stars just right from the inn itself. It's a really dark uh, part of the state over on Deer Isle, so you have really great skies. I mean, I remember as a child just growing up, going up to Maine and seeing the stars and just couldn't believe it. You feel like you can just grab them out of the sky. So it is an absolutely amazing thing. And, we'll always be keeping our eye on stuff like the Aurora Borealis this time of the year. It every once in a while is seen in Maine. Not a common thing, but, obviously if it's got a flare up, because we're in a big solar cycle this year, if we're in a flare up, we'll definitely be keeping our eyes on that for sure.
Oh, that would just be a fantastic experience and an ultimate bonus to have the aurora on this trip. Um,
Not likely, but would be amazing.
yes, it definitely would. You never know what nature's going to give us. So next, if we could continue on the photography, but going to luggage, can people bring an additional camera bag or the luggage allowances that you listed? That is what it is? Maybe if you could go a little bit further detail when it comes to camera gear and the luggage allowances that you talked about earlier.
Yeah, so within the luggage allowances, we ask you really to just keep that big bag at 40 pounds and then, or under. And in terms of like, if you have a day pack and a smaller camera bag, that's totally fine. Like I said, we have a lot of space in the vans and we can usually make, uh, you know, everything work. So it shouldn't be an issue. You can have a day pack and then a little smaller camera bag as well, because I know sometimes it can be confusing to have both. But there's plenty of space in the vans and should be able to accommodate that, no problem.
Oh, that's great. And for the bigger duffel bags, is it okay if someone has like a duffel bag with wheels on the bottom, or should they just be soft-sided, or what do you think of that?
Self-sided is definitely preferred, because on this departure, all of our luggage will be in the back seat of the van. So it does help the expedition leaders with getting it in there if it is soft-sided. But obviously, if you bring one with wheels, we're going to make it work.
Fantastic. Thanks for that.
Of course.
And then for peak colors, what is the best time of year to maybe look at this trip for peak colors?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the probably the most difficult thing to predict is when peak fall is going to be in New England. Many websites are dedicated to it, and they're quite often wrong. Uh, Last year, it was sometime between the second and third trip was peak fall colors. Um, so, it's the thing that we do really well at NatHab is we're in Maine for the best time of the year. So if you're on the first trip, and I'm leading the one on September 20th, I would imagine you're not going to see peak fall colors, but you'll definitely see incredible fall colors mixed with a little warmer weather. And then as the trips get more into October, you'll start to see more of the brilliant peak colors with colder weather, because that's kind of part of the process. As those nights get really cold, the colors do get a lot more vibrant. So hard to say when peak exactly is going to be. I'd probably be a millionaire if I knew, but definitely, I would say probably the second or third trip will most likely be the ones that see peak.
Fantastic. And I do have a couple questions in here asking about where to see that webinar that you referenced by course. So I'll just let everybody know, if you go to the Maine Coastal Explorer page on the website in the videos and webinar section, that is where you will see Court's webinar capturing the colors of fall. And I'll just go ahead and put it in the replay email for everybody. I do have lots of photography questions in here, so I'll just do that for everyone. I'll also link it in the follow-up email to everybody so that it can make it really easy for you, for anyone who wants to see that.
Thanks, Brooke.
Um,
That'd be great because I know it is. It's a great photography destination and one that I just love to take photos of.
yes, I'm just going through. Oh, this is a good question that just came in. Can we travel light or do we need lots of different outfits for fashion competition? That's a funny question. That's great. Yeah, that's awesome.
We typically save the tuxedos and dresses for the farewell dinner, but on this departure, we do eat at a lot of really nice restaurants. But you don't need to be overly fancy. Maine is a really laid-back state. I think flannel is in Maine, so you do not need to be overly fancy. I certainly won't be getting dressed up every night for dinner. But that being said, we do go out to some nice restaurants. So if you want to look nice, absolutely can do that as well. Because we'll be down in, Camden, Maine, Bar Harbor, Maine, going out to some really cool eateries there.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And I think that this will be the last prep question that I'll ask you. If somebody has a later flight home, can they take the hotel shuttle to the airport?
Yeah, that's something that we can typically help out with is they can hang out at the Residence Inn in Bangor, and either the expedition leader can take them or the airport shuttle can take them as well if they have a later flight. So they don't need to just sit at the Bangor airport. And the Bangor airport is very small, so everyone knows. So, pretty quick in and out of TSA, but we'll be able to make that work for whoever, if they have a later flight, getting them there at a later time.
Fantastic. Well, Arthur, thank you so much for just going through all those questions. And I would love to turn it to you for any last closing thoughts.
Absolutely. Well, once again, thank you to everyone for tuning in this afternoon. I am so excited to get up to Maine and explore the magical coastline with the granite cliffs and the colorful trees and just the peacefulness that Maine can provide, and doing it in just such an unrushed way. So I really look forward to this upcoming season in Maine and cannot wait to see some of y'all out there. And thanks for tuning in this afternoon.
Yes, and thank you for giving us such a great webinar today, Arthur. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in. Join us Monday for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out next week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. And keep an eye out for our Sunday e-news announcement. We did record today's presentations, and we will have that replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.